Still really excited about this panel and happy to introduce Jennifer Arcuri and Matthew Hickey. Jennifer Arcuri is the founder of Hacker House, InnoTech Network, video producer, serial entrepreneur, and cybersecurity ethical hacker. She's experienced in information security, fundraising, social media, e-commerce, social commerce, website development, idea and brand development and implementation, mobile development, effective presentation, negotiating skills. She can do it all. She's highly enthusiastic about networks of professionals, particularly entrepreneurs and investors in cybersecurity. And she's focused on tech-based clusters in London, Newcastle, Oxford, Cambridge, LA, New York, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and across the ASEAN region, Middle East, South Africa, Scandinavia, and most of Europe. I think she's covered the globe. Matthew Hickey is a founding member of Cove Credit, a blockchain-backed DAO founded by the people for the people using XRPL open source technology. Cove Credit provides financial solutions services on blockchains using Web3 and Ripple technology. Cove Credit received a grant from the Ripple Foundation to work on open source technology solutions using XRPL. Matthew is a professional hacker with over 20 years experience providing security services to a global client base, and he's the founder of Hacker House, co-founder of Hacker House. He is widely known for his research on vulnerabilities and has authored a book on the subject of ethical hacking. He is an expert in the cybersecurity field, simulating attacks on global and high-risk environments to detect and identify information risks. So I'll let you two take it from here.
Thank you, Shelley. Before you get started, Matthew and Jennifer, it was really important for us when I spoke with Matthew and Jennifer a few weeks ago to put things into perspective. And the perspective by that I mean is, media sometimes overtakes what's in our mind. We forget that there's more than what we hear on the media today. And the ability to separate foundational technologies is sometimes overshadowed by what we see in the media on a day-to-day basis. And as we continue to see the SEC, the XRP media hype, we forget what Ripple actually does and was built for. Apart from everything else that they're doing well, there are certain things that we don't see and don't pay attention to because it's not given enough visibility. And so I thought today, Matthew, you could start with some of the foundational aspects of crypto, what the world looks like in that respect, and then dive down deeper into a little bit that the work you and Jennifer are doing with Ripple on XRPL and how you got there and what you see the future to look like. I did take some of your time this morning, so I'll give you that back as we continue down this session, but I'll let you guys take it off from here.
Well, thank you very much, Kareem and Shelley, for the awesome introductions. I actually have some slides, so I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, can you all see that? If someone could just acknowledge whether they can see that.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I think that's really important, Kareem, what you were saying about taking it back to the basics and explaining. And I know a lot of people in the cybersecurity space would be wondering, why would I be interested in something like a banker's coin with the SEC and everything else? So I really wanted to explain some of the journey that led us to XRP and the XRPL and Ripple technology. So I was going to do a quick introduction here. But obviously Shelley's covered that for us. So I'm going to just head straight into it. But thank you.
Actually, Matthew, it's important to hear from your words as well, please, because
Sure.
That would be great. Thank you.
But Jennifer, if you want to just give you a quick introduction to yourself, and then I'll follow.
Hi, everyone, and thank you. I mean, my work started in London in the fintech space, and hosting these various discussions that kind of turned in, or that began my journey into security. And it is a lot of the work that I've done with Matthew over the last few years between financial technology, security, blockchain, that has led us where we are today, which is why we felt like this upcoming discussion is so important. There's so much FUD in this space. So that's why, laying the foundation here and kind of clearing the air. Thank you, Kareem, for this opportunity.
And just to echo on with that, I've been a professional computer hacker for the better part of 20 years. Clients hire me and my team to simulate what the adversaries might do, but targeting different sectors and developing attack tools to best give them preparedness. We do these kind of cyber preparedness drills where we target systems and networks and try to expose vulnerabilities in them. And then report them and get those vulnerabilities fixed. So we work with clients from all manner of backgrounds, from public safety, security, government, central banking, finance, like kind of a wide berth of people. And that gave me a lot of exposure to different technologies and a lot of different interesting challenges. And I've been interested in blockchain for, ever since I first heard of it. And I'll get into that in the presentation. So cybersecurity, a big focus on open source technology. I believe that people can change the world much quicker with a computer keyboard than they ever will with any kind of, guns or bullets or protests or things like that. I believe that technology really empowers people to do things that, perhaps we wouldn't be able to achieve in today's society. And, again, we'll cover some of that. So, I'm just going to go straight into it today. If we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about, why we as a company, as Cove Crypto, which is our Web3 or a company that we're founded, why we chose that technology. And it's important to understand a little bit of the history. So in the early 2000s, the concept of kind of cyberspace became like a virtual world. People were playing games like Second Life. They were playing games like World of Warcraft, MMORPGs. Were becoming a regular part of things. People were joining online worlds through games consoles, through PCs. They were extending out from AOL chat rooms into these virtual spaces where they could do things, create things, tangible goods, and economies started to flourish around that. In particular, Second Life, the Linden dollar, had a tangible real world benefit. The company said that there was a number of dollars that would be worth for this in-game currency. And that really kickstarted off a world of online economies and virtual exchanges where people would be able to trade digital goods for real world finance. And a lot of technologies like the VHS, the Blu-ray and mini discs, there was a drive from an underground market or an underground economy that pushes technology and pushes things in. So, around this time, cybercrime, and obviously my background in cybersecurity, I was doing a lot of work trying to understand how attackers were doing certain things. And there was a vibrant underground market. The Russian criminals who were doing a lot of credit card fraud interacted with the Americans who were doing a lot of fake identities, novel identity cards, and underground forums like Shadow Crew, the International Association for the Advancement of Criminal Activity, which is quite a mouthful. But these underground forums rose up where people were transacting and buying in illicit goods, malware, computer exploits, an underground economy had begun to form around, these kinds of services, drugs and guns and all of that awful stuff that goes on in the world. But innovation in these kinds of spaces was driven a lot by that. So there was huge problems there is how do people pay things? And, there was a lot of different ways, and a lot of cash-based systems existed where people would pay for things in e-gold. And at the time, some young hackers came to me and said, had I heard about Bitcoin? And we're getting down the road now, sort of 2008. And they said that they could pay me with something like an email address. And I was like, how does that work, sort of thing, And it was a white paper that had been posted to a mailing list that effectively was a proof of concept. And at the time, people who were selling computer code or getting payments for these kinds of things in those markets, they were using, e-gold or physical goods and cash and things like that, which was very hard to do. And suddenly this Bitcoin technology came along, and you could pay somebody just like you could with an email address. And it really changed everything almost overnight. underground markets flourished, where payments could be made with something that was as simple as sending an email. So I was fascinated. I needed to know how this thing worked. And it was really the start of a revolution in finance and also more than that. When blockchains were introduced, they were called and hailed as a new computer paradigm. People began to look at this technology as a way to change and shift the balance and redress the power of institutions. They were decentralized, they were peer-to-peer, they were privacy-oriented, they were backed by cryptography, they were resistant to censorship. And this kind of theme of an open world order versus a new world order kind of came into the conversation, where people who were strong open source technologists or advocates for computer technologies changing our existence began to advocate for blockchains and open source technology, and a concern about, well, what if these fall into the wrong hands, things like central banking, digital currencies, and everything else that we're seeing today. So there's very different mindsets. And one of the things about blockchains is that they were machine-aided consensus, and that is they solved a computer problem. How do we agree on something if you've got 10 people in a decentralized network, and one of them is called Alice and one's called Bob, and Alice sends $10 to Bob? How do we know that Eve on the other side, if she changes the record and says, hey, that was $20, how do we know what's the truth of the situation? Did Alice send, Bob $10, or did he send a $20? And obviously that problem was solved through machine-aided consensus, which is what blockchains brought to the table in terms of a new paradigm. And it really triggered a lot of people's brains and got a lot of people thinking and discussing. So there was increased connectivity, decreased overheads, and then this concept of Web3 started to be bounced around, that these blockchains would somehow allow us to re-engineer the future. And then, this is 2008-9, I'd say, around this time, where this conversation really starts to be at the forefront of mailing lists of people who are on the bleeding edge of tech. They're really driven to understand this. And that was really important because it made things like Ripple and others be a little bit overlooked, because actually we shape tech. Our society, our views, our ideologies shape tech. And if you understand much about technology, you'll know that there's a very strong left political alignment and a very strong left-leaning bias in technology. And we talk about biases in tech all the time when we're talking about machine learning, when we're talking about artificial intelligence and the reflection of us and society and how that's influencing tech. So, does technology influence society, or does society influence technology? And with blockchains, it's a little bit of both, because our understanding of what this new computer paradigm is and what it will do and what it can achieve is tied quite heavily to political and social ideology. So, for instance, crypto anarchists will believe in the dispolishment of state and authority, that there is order in chaos. And they believe in proof of work. They heavily believe in this concept because there's no authority. It allows everybody to be an equal participant in the new financial system. And then there's kind of perhaps more libertarian ideologies, which seek a benefit of market use. And they kind of want a minimal to no authority perspective. And there are varying different views on either side of on the table. And obviously on the right there, I've got the political compass, which shows where people sit by answering a number of questions that allow you to evaluate your own political ideology. And what's important to understand is that when we're evaluating technology, our individual biases actually shape the view of what that technology can achieve. If you're an anarchist, you see a technology that can change institutions, you're immediately going to think, how can I dismantle institutions with this? If you're a libertarian, you might think, well, I might need an institutional power of some kind, and how can I use this for market use? So our individual biases and ideologies actually shape what we see or what we hope technology will achieve, and that can influence in how we then interact with it, build with it, and everything else. So we as people actually shape the technology and the solutions. And I think this was key because the left bias in technology sectors allow technologies like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, and everything to come to the forefront of the conversation, and were heavily influencing what people saw blockchain could do. And it made people overlook things like XRP because it got the nickname of the banker's coin. And I'll come into the technologies now. It's just, I am a very technological driven person, and I'll take questions at the end. But for these decentralized blockchains to work, they are essentially an immutable store of data. They are a record of transactions, a ledger that we, in a decentralized fashion, that everybody can view and see, did Alice send Bob $10? No, he sent her $20, and we can verify that on the ledger. And it requires a consensus. Now, the proof of work, which is Satoshi's original vision for blockchain, was published on a mailing list. And it's actually a misconception that it came from Bitcoin itself. It was originally proposed on the same mailing list prior to the release of the Bitcoin white paper. And actually, Satoshi incorporated many aspects of technologies that had been theorized on this mailing list and brought them to the reality of the forefront. Now, one of them was proof of work, which was the consensus algorithm that we would use to agree upon whether Alice had sent Bob that $10. And it relied upon computers solving a problem for equal participation. Now, that was a concept. It was never really understood what blockchains would do, what they would achieve, and how they would solve problems. And so because of that, there was a number of attacks, things like the 51% attack, where if you can take control of 51% of the computation power, you can influence the ledger. So realistically, proof of work was just something that was intended to show that this is a concept that could work, that tokenization of things could become something. And it was a way to achieve that had been hypothesized before and now was implemented so it could be seen. Subsequently to that, Silicon Valley, Ethereum, large banks started to pay attention to Bitcoin. What is this digital money that people are using to pay each other, just like sending an email? And a proof of stake model kind of came into the equation. And the consensus model that I'm going to discuss in a minute already existed at this point. But proof of stake is an adoption of a venture capitalist model, where a person who owns a particular stake or has a particular stake of ownership, it gets a number of voting rights, that says, hey, we have a stake in this network and I can control my influence on that network based on the size of the stake that I have. And again, as a computer security person, this obviously allows it to whoever owns it, a billionaire can come in and buy the biggest stake and they can decide what happens to the technology. And a Byzantine consensus, which was what was proposed by the Ripple Foundation with XRP, is a software-based algorithm that runs on a series of decentralized nodes that programmatically, that in an algorithmic way, determines, did Alice send Bob $10? And does that entirely in software. It doesn't require complex cryptography, puzzle solving. It doesn't require stake of ownership. It is a software algorithm which determines consensus. This is brilliant. And largely overlooked because of the fact that people saw their own ideologies reflected in technology and said, hey, proof of work, we're going to dismantle the system. Who wants a software algorithm that the banks are going to use, regardless of that software algorithm actually providing a form of strong consensus that solved a very important blockchain problem that came with this new computing paradigm. So I got into Bitcoin mining. I got into mining in a massive way. These are some of the mining systems that I had around proof of work. And it's really because I understood and have gone through that evolution and looked at these different models that I was able to understand what Ripple really did when you look through the tech. These are some of the machines that I built and we would run in our house. They would run super hot. It felt like an oven most of the time. We've got water-cooled systems down there and these jalapenos and Bitcoin things. And this was a bookshelf that, I set these machines up on a bookshelf in 2010 and mined 10 Bitcoin, which is something that would be worth, 6 figures today. But at the time was barely 5 figures, and these kinds of machines that people were building was meant to kind of provide the security of the blockchain. And I built tons of them, and we would take the machines apart, we would look at them. But I've come to understand that this is an obsolescence. It's really causing a lot, in terms of environmental use, in terms of energy uses, in terms of fossil fuel uses. People say the existing banking infrastructure uses more electricity than the blockchain, but it is kind of a needless waste to be building these machines that do one thing only, and then they're obsolete and become kind of regulated to the trash can. And I've thrown more of these away over the years than they've actually, maybe produced at times. So they are interesting systems, and it was great to do it. And at the time, Bitcoin was the thing because it was new. The computations were exciting, and there was there was money to be made. They were almost like little digital money presses that you could throw on a bookshelf and collect a bunch of cryptocurrency. And this is still possible today with other emerging technologies. And mining is a super interesting concept. But again, in terms of what it solved, did it really solve the problems that this new paradigm needed. So Ripple and XRP actually did solve a problem, right? And we talked a lot about blockchain at the time as having problem-solving potential, but Ripple actually solved the problem. And that problem was improved into banking messaging. Their bridge tokenized currency, the idea of changing one token from another, really gave blockchain their start as a financial services product. It was the fastest on the market. Transactions were settled much more quickly. It was eco-friendly. It didn't have the overheads that came with the proof of work system. It provided as a kind of bridge currency for liquidity to change currencies amongst each other, and the ability to run private side change. This earned it the nickname of the banker's coin, and that kind of made a lot of people not want to look at it, because the whole point and premise of crypto anarchy was, let's get rid of the banks. So a lot of people were just quick to dismiss Ripple because they just saw it as something that this is the banker's technology, but actually it was a problem that had been solved, and that problem was in banking. Upgrading these interpayment processing systems like SWIFT, which institutions use to move money between each other. They have a kind of four-eyed process. There's a lot of overhead in SWIFT and SWIFT Alliance Lite. The Ripple token and payment processing solved this problem, and Santander utilized it through something called OnePayFX. And actually the institutions themselves became the very first target market for what this technology could change. And the institutions realized this. They realized we're at risk unless we become obsolete, unless we begin to innovate on blockchain, because somebody else will innovate on blockchain, realize that we are dinosaurs in terms of how money markets and money positions move, and they will not use us anymore. And that's kind of what happened really with the Ripple and the SEC, is that they ended up replacing a core part of the financial backbone of the planet, and thus that threatens institutions and brings institutions, wrath essentially to the table. And dealing with the SEC, I believe, for Ripple at this point is a little bit like dealing with a parking ticket when you've parked in the wrong spot in the car park. But again, it's important to note my opinions don't reflect that of Ripple. I'm an individual, and these reflect my views and what I understand about the technology. But the bridge token and interledger protocol, the things that Ripple have actually outlined, again, start to solve important problems in technology. If you think about how the internet came into existence, the internet was kind of a thing that allowed interoperability. It allowed system owners on digital equipment to talk to system owners of Hewlett-Packard and SCO. Other individuals, other companies being able to communicate with other companies' products and services is what grew the internet into what we have today. And 80% of banks today are exploring programmable smart money in the form of centralized banking digital currencies. And that interoperability will be required across domestic markets. For individual markets to communicate with Spain, to talk to France, they will need to be interoperable with what they've actually built. And XRP works as a bridge token to provide neutrality for this kind of liquidity and transfer of centralized currencies. They have brilliant partnerships already within the financial services sector, because they were the technologists that the institutions were able to reach out to and communicate. And subsequently, it's had Visa actually turn around and call it the most interesting innovation in payments. If you actually read Ripple's white papers, they have an explainer themselves about where they see the future of these centralized banking currencies, what they believe their interledger does. And there's a little diagram there at the bottom that shows that money can be moved around disparately through different technologies, through different blockchains, by utilizing what XRP and the bridge tokens and interledger protocols have provided. So this is really fascinating. If you think about the history of the internet, where the internet came from today, and why the internet is known as, TCP/IP and not IPX, why these networking standards existed. Microsoft's networking standard TCP/IP compared with Novell's IPX. Why did one technology succeed and not the other? Interoperability was a key metric for that. If your network stack only talked to one specific vendor and only implemented one specific set of functionality, and another networks vendor did 10 different sets of functionality and talked to 10 separate vendors, most people would choose the one that gave them more flexibility, better connectivity. And that's what Ripple's blockchain, actually the solution that they proposed, provides to people through these interledger protocols and other changes, and the use of a bridge token. So obviously, the initial idea of being able to pay someone in a way like an email address brought about new changes. It wasn't just Alice wanted to send, Alice wanted to send Bob $10 and get some money that way. Alice perhaps wanted to sell Bob a house or a car. And these kinds of financial problems and other things kind of introduce the concept of a non-fungible token. And if you've ever seen The Lawnmower Man, where the guys kind of goes into the cyberspace and everything else, there's a lot of talk about metaverse and the future of technology and how these tokenized metadata objects that are shared amongst the blockchain go beyond just what we've determined to be currency. I'm paying someone $10, but you can in fact describe an entire object. You can describe properties of that object, the color of it, the shape of it, the size of it, the amount of land that is being broken up. And it's kind of a lot more than just putting sombreros on giraffes, but it's kind of fun too, right? You get people are creating artwork and they're selling artwork, and it's creating new kinds of monetization strategies, just like we've seen before with things like Napster, and these kinds of technologies where people came along to start sharing things, and it revolutionized the music industry. NFTs are revolutionizing the way that people think about ownership of digital goods. And these digital goods can enable things in games, in functionality, and they're really kind of bringing disruption. And at the moment, that's very focused on the gaming and collectors market. But it typically is starting to expand this concept that we have of cyberspace, this second life, these virtual worlds, into something called a metaverse, using virtual reality and augmented reality, where we are going to join these virtual spaces to interact with each other and see each other in 3D and everything else. And that's really an exciting change, and a lot of people are very passionate about that. I think it's really interesting. I'm a low-level systems person, so to me, it's all about what's happening under the hood of all of that. That's where I find intellectual enjoyment from solving problems. So again, programmable money came into the equation as well through something called smart contracts. And this was really something that Ethereum brought to the table. So if we're thinking about innovations in blockchain, I like to think of three of them. Bitcoin for its proof of work and general proof of concept, showing that a tokenized currency thing can exist. There can be wallets and users can transact. Ethereum brought a concept of a programmable money. It had smart contracts, and it introduced a world computer, which had a virtual machine. And as a concept, it's fascinating, but it has all the computational power of a Raspberry Pi. If you've got a world global computer that's costing, what it costs to run things in gas fees and everything else, and it's no more powerful than something I can buy from a store for $5, it really begs the question as to, is that the direction that this technology will take? And it's certainly an interesting aspect of the technology, and that is that the programmable aspect. And Ripple realized that too with their development of hooks, and the smart contracts that exist out there. They can perform functions. So you can send a payment. You send $10 to Bob. Bob pays $2 to his accountant that he needs to pay, and $3 in taxes, and Bob's got $5 left, which he puts to his savings account, and all that can happen programmatically. Or a decision could be more the outcome of a sports game, for instance, for betting purposes. But these smart contracts can basically perform functions, evaluate statements, and perform operations with tokens when somebody starts to make a payment between users on a blockchain. So XRPL is under development. It has something called hooks, and also an EVM sidechain. This is what's interesting about the interoperability. Everything that's been achieved with smart contracts on Ethereum can equally be achieved with XRPL and their AVM sidechain. You can just utilize the EVM and the technology solutions of Ethereum directly through the interoperability features of sidechains, of having something that allows you to communicate with more than one technology. That is really, I think, super cool, and shows really the power of why I decided that we would investigate and develop more on XRPL and XRPL. And this concept of sidechains is also undergoing some changes. And I think it's really important if you think about what a sidechain could provide, right? If we're not all going to maybe perhaps use the future, but if we think about what Web3 might look like, perhaps I'm going to get goods from Starbucks, okay? And there might be a Starbucks sidechain that provides some kind of tokenization, some kind of rewards back for customers every time I'm buying coffee or a virtual good. Maybe I take my coffee into the metaverse. These federated sidechains might say, well, Starbucks and Costa Coffee or another coffee establishment might want to federate together and have a federator and share some information between their side chains and bridge those together. So the concept of private side chains allow institutions to create their own private ledgers and individuals too, by bringing some concepts of them being able to work together or having a standalone one. And they can be bridged, which allows for disparate technologies, disparate solutions, Ethereum to interoperate with XRP through the XRPL or the actual the technology. So apologies if I misspoke. The technology is still quite complex, but you can essentially make your own sidechain, make your own blockchain. You can have a blockchain to do something that your institution does, and then interoperate it through the technology solutions that have been provided by Ripple, enabling things like decentralized finance, independence from existing institutions, build your own institution. It's really quite an exciting concept to have this interoperation between different disparate technologies. And a key thing is there where we've talked about is the consensus. Well, what Ripple provided with their consensus algorithm and the model of authority. So I've got a little diagram here that just shows like a centralized authority. That is like today's world, your bank. Your bank is all knowing, right? You go into your bank, they tell you something's wrong with your account. You say, okay, that must be right because you're the bank and I've got trust in you. And Ripple kind of have like an authority as well, but it's decentralized. And this is where people get confused about the concept of a centralized technology with Ripple, because they themselves ran the authority in the early days, but their goal has always been to decentralize it, to move it to disparate geographical locations. And it's important to think about authority, because if you're buying Starbucks, right, how do you know you're buying Starbucks and not just some guy who created a Starbucks lookalike, right? That is kind of what authority provides. When you say, okay, here's a brand and that brand says this product is legitimate, you're trusting that the product you're getting is truly legitimate. So without some form of authority in what this new Web3 will look like, you know, we kind of lose some of the benefits. If we have a fully decentralized, everyone equal power, no form of authority, then how do you deal with refunds, complaints, hacks, losses, risks like that are passed on to the end user? End users don't want to use technology that comes with high levels of risk. You know, forks of technology where somebody disagrees with what a technology is doing and wants to change it, or disagrees with how something is being done in that technology, you know, they end up with disputes. And then what you have is you have forks of the same technology. You have Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, Ethereum Classic. Forks and changes then introduce a nostalgia. People hang on to the technology because they're nostalgic about what that technology will do because of their beliefs in what that technology will do. And with XRP, there's actually no forks, because the software algorithm, the model that it created, allows what's known as a kind of human trust, or a proof of association, a grouping of nodes and individuals who agree, this is Starbucks, this is MIT, this is the White House. These human verified links to these institutions allow them to trust one another and create a consensus of these institutions agreeing what happens on chain based on what their nodes and their validators actually see. And if they want to change something, let's say that a massive incident happens, or there's some major problem, or quantum computers come along and break the encryption, they can propose a change, upgrade the change, and address that change by upgrading the network without a need for a fork. So not just interoperability, but the ability to upgrade and provide updates to software. We've all seen how updates in computers drive us nuts. You know, you get a pop-up on your machine that says, I need to apply a patch, you need to apply this, update this. Well, do you really want your money being, you know, smart money being unupdatable and not ever getting fixes in the same way? People say, well, Bitcoin has that. And in terms of, yeah, they have a BIP, they have a foundation, but changes result in new networks. Take Lightning, for instance. They needed a faster network. They didn't upgrade Bitcoin. They built a new Lightning network on top of it to improve the speed of transactions. You know, whereas that isn't the case with XRP. What happens there is with that technology, upgrades and updates can be achieved, and they do that. XLS20 is a good example of it. So there's another technology we use today that has a kind of centralized authority on a decentralized system on the internet. That's SSL or TLS. It's the way in which we have enabled commerce for Web 2.0. When you go to a website and that website is encrypted and you see, yeah, my information is being sent to that website and that website only, it exists because we have an authoritarian trust. We have a model of trust that allows us to believe that what we're doing is sending that information to that website and that website alone. And that powers commerce on Web 2.0. It's reasonable to assume that a similar thing will need to exist to power commerce in Web 3. And Ripple providing a foundational blockchain that allows a software-defined or a software algorithmic consensus efficiently through validators and consensus is a way in which we could provide a side chain. I could take their technology and create my own chain that says, hey, I am Starbucks, and here are my authoritarian servers, and you can trust these servers because I'm Starbucks, and I put out a press release saying here they are. So it allows for people to have an efficient foundation to build on. And XRPL is their open source offering, their kind of gift to the world to say, hey, you're an open source technologist, come and build on what we've built. We built an efficient payment processing for banks, and some of the stuff that it does and actually solves will have an influence on Web 3. But it's important to distinguish between the two, okay? The XRP is a payment processing is designed for the bridge tokens for handling these liquidity things, whereas some of the technology that it's created solves some of the needs that we will have in Web 3. And that's why I believe that Ripple and what they've built is something that's worth investigating and continuing to build on and develop for. So as an example, right, how can you cause some disruption? So one of the things I like to do is take a technology and do something with it to try and see. And as a disruption model, amateur radio provides us with a way of doing a science-backed experiments, okay? And amateur radio enthusiasts, they'll jump on their radio and they'll send a radio transmission from America 8,000 miles away to South Africa. And those two people will record in their logbooks and say, I spoke to Jim in South Africa, and Jim says he spoke to John in America. And then they will sign these records and then prove these records and send them to a centralized bureau who will then tally up all of these records to say, you've spoken to Africa 100 times. Here is a certificate to prove you spoke to Africa. In this model, our bureau is an institution. They have overheads and they have costs. By replacing the institution with a blockchain, the overheads and the costs will be reduced. When those two radio amateurs transmit their record, it can go onto a blockchain. It's fully transparent. It's visible to everyone. The institution itself could see what was going on it. They no longer have to process it in the same way because they've got it all on a ledger and a blockchain. And then that institution can use programmable smart contracts to issue those awards. So that's an example of how something that is being done in a traditional paper and cryptographic way with a centralized institution or a powerful authority can be disrupted with something like a blockchain. And that really opens us up to new business disruption models with this technology and what it can achieve. And another example is software licensing. And I'll give an example of when I've tried this, but software licensing is another model that's open to disruption through a blockchain. Because if you have a two-way communication by a service provider, I purchase a piece of software, that software provider says, hey, I've got a license for you, you're approved to do it. There's a lot of overhead and costs involved in managing that and maintaining that and keeping up to date with what's going on with your customers' needs and the communications and everything else involved with it, plus the systems. So the service provider is authorizing a license, just like an award, really, that can be used, that's required to run their software. And there's a lot of different models of that in terms of solutions that have come along. And if you have an activation server that your computer phones out to that server and says, is my license valid? Yes, it is. Congratulations, you can run the software. A blockchain can replace that process. You can issue a token to somebody that says your software is valid and licensed, and it becomes more efficient, it can reduce costs, and it actually can become more harder to pirate goods because you can periodically validate, am I the person holding this token? Is this token valid for this particular piece of software? Real time on a decentralized network that's always online, similarly to how the internet is always online. No internet, no ability to run the software. It really is like opening up markets and ways of disrupting technology through utilizations of blockchains. So I actually went and tried to do some of this in 2021, and I was featured in some news articles because I took a piece of software, tokenized it, and gave asset rights and ownership and actually tried to sell it to kind of disrupt the vulnerability management marketplace, to kind of get people having conversations. It was intended to get people talking about what we might want to achieve with software, what we might want to achieve with ownership of digital goods, and how they actually will look in these new computer paradigms. For me, I think the future of innovation will go beyond financial services and markets. Some of these concepts that we're seeing emerge from Web3 around decentralized networks, sovereignty of data, identity and access management are going to re-engineer the way that we use the internet today and change institutional powers that exist. Now, either those institutional powers will come along at the forefront of this innovation and join this change, or individuals themselves will be doing it, new startups. It will enable new kinds of economies and things. And Ripple is well positioned to benefit from its efficient payment solution because it's built interoperability technologies. It's come up with solutions to a problem already, and it's done that efficiently and kept it simple, which is a key metric again in tech. And effectively, their open source, their XRPL, is a gift from them for open source technology people to build and interact and explore with something that has typically been seen as something for institutions. And I think that's wonderful, really, because it really does provide something for people to be able to actually interact with and look at, and when I dealt with these Ethereums and everything else and NFTs, these centralized institutions, they were able to pull listings, they were able to change things. And it was really showing that we need to have technology solutions that perhaps are different from proof of work, proof of stake, through the implementation of what is now kind of being dubbed proof of association, a human trust-based model that has software algorithm that determines via a computer whether your transactions and your ownership of an asset, etc., is valid. Decentralized autonomous organizations, that's what we decided to found with something called Cove Credit. It's a credit union that's built by the people for the purposes of working together on social things, and essentially we're building a bank but owned by the people. And as part of that, we've been building tools on the XRPL. We approached Ripple as part of their grants program, and we raised some cash for building command line utilities. And essentially, with my background as being involved in computer hacking, and I essentially started writing a tool to explore their network and explore their blockchains to make that better and more easily accessible for developers. And you can, we'll go into that in a minute, but the decentralized autonomous organizations allow people to create entire businesses on chain. You can take human resources department and write smart contracts that will handle up who gets paid based on a list of employees at a particular time. And you can write another smart contract or an API that gets that list of employees so that when a payment comes in, those employees can be paid automatically without the need for payroll or backs or automated transfers. Tax can be calculated. Everything that you need to do currently can be done more efficiently through these programmable units. It's transparent. It allows everybody in the company to see what's going on where, provides risks and protections of information risk again, and other fraudulent risks like embezzlement, etc. And these provide an ability to have people in disparate locations all over the globe to work together simultaneously on the same goals and organization in a new kind of way. It's a programmable business that's all handled in an autonomous fashion. It's a company or an organization that is completely decentralized, that has these kind of units to do these different things. So users and members of these DAOs form communities, they form community groups, and Jennifer has been a key pivotal person for bringing people together and bringing these groups together to discuss how that would look. And it enables a kind of bedroom unicorn startup is a term, or a garage startup. It really takes technology back to its earlier days where people can, in their garage, build a company like Apple. Because the technology allows them to build something that scales much larger than themselves. It allows them access to a global pool of talent. It enables them access to do things that really were just not within the realms of possibility before this technology came along. And our DAO is very focused on building open source technology to solve problems and encourage development, things like that. So we've got some code that we wrote for that. You can go on our GitHub, and this is just an example of some of the tools that we've been writing on the XRPL. As a quick example there, we created a mint file harness where you can just take a file, immediately mint it, pin it to as an NFT, and create that as on a wallet. And all our code is licensed under MIT, so it's free for reuse. Ripple, gave us some money, so everything that we do, we're giving back for free. There's no charge for it. It's intended for you to take it and do what you want with it. And what we've been doing is building individual use cases of the user journey. I want to sell a house, or I want to sell an asset or a car or whatever, going through the SDK, understanding those individual transactions, and then building them into a command line interface, which is a hacker-friendly way or a developer-friendly way of doing something. So we wanted to, that's what we were trying to solve, is to try and bridge that gap between what institutional knowledge has about payment processing and how to get that technology into the hands of people that like to hack around on it and do interesting things with technology and push those barriers and make it go somewhere else. And the XRPL is perfect for that, because no proof of work, no proof of stake. It's a software-based algorithm. You really can build a new decentralized autonomous organization out of whatever you want, or look at NFTs, or create software licensing, to license your software. And you just need to be able to understand and navigate that. And that's really where I'm learning new things every day about how this technology works, because the innovation and what is happening is more people are waking up to this and pushing the boundaries of what we can achieve with this technology. So that's a little bit about us. I'll take questions now with Jennifer. I'll quickly check the chat. If you want to get more background on us, we have a Twitter account, we have a GitHub account. Most of what we do is there. We're working on building a Web3 only interface to explain more about us. And it's still under active development. We're still actively developing that. We were part of the Wave 3 grants, which closed a couple of months ago, and we're still working with developers, working with teams. And if you want to learn about our cybersecurity and our cybersecurity offerings, we're at hacker.house. So you can go there and look at the types of services we do. We were one of the first cybersecurity companies to introduce blockchain assessment services for understanding vulnerabilities in how this technology works. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Take to the channel. Hopefully I didn't misspeak there. Remember, these are my views, they're Cove Crypto's views and Jennifer's views. They're not the views of the Ripple Foundation. We're working to build technology for people to use on that technology, but a lot of that is also my views and my own understanding of what this technology can do. So if there are questions, I'll happily take them now.
Matthew, before we open to the floor, okay, there's an important point in the brilliant kind of, presentation you've given around programmable money. Now, people are very worried about what's happening in the banks and, the idea of someone controlling their money or keeping them from accessing it, and what Web3 and what is happening inside this space, bears with it a lot of fear-mongering headlines. Can you just address the point of how, that we are building outside of the banks, that innovation can't be stopped here, that there's ways to build around on top of, and, through these parameters that might be set, alternatives to transacting outside the banks?
Well, that's the thing about what Ripple and the XRPL have done, is that the very concept of it, if you have centralized banking digital currencies, right, and they need to be interoperable between markets, let's say the Bank of England issues its own digital pound, okay? There needs to be a kind of liquidity, there needs to be a movement of that. Perhaps they want to change the digital pound to the digital euro or the digital dollar. These changes that can come with surveillance, that can come with very frightening aspects in terms of the institutions knowing you spent your money on groceries this week, and people are concerned, rightfully so, that these technologies can be used as a means to coerce and control the population. Then, if you look at what the actual XRPL is, it came with a centralized institution, which is the Ripple Foundation, and then their goal has always been to decentralize that out to other institutions around the world. So it is not owned by a single institution. And that concept of a human trust model is really something, a proof of concept like the internet, that shows a decentralized world that doesn't have a singular authority. No one person controls the XRPL. So even if these CBDCs come along and considering 80% of banks are programming them and considering it already, utilizing the technologies that Ripple have provided, those technologies actually allow us as people to be independent from those institutions if we choose anyway. So we can always build around it. People will always be able to see store of value. There will always be ways for people to build their own organizations or build their own institutions, which is exactly what we've ended up rising to the challenge to do. I mean, when Jennifer told me, let's build a bank, I thought, well, what? And then I started sketching sketching the network diagram and then the architecture and then the APIs. And before long we knew it, we had phase one of a bank and a bunch of tech in front of us. And we were like, hey, this is awesome. Let's do more of this. So that is where I see this technology really, is that it can enable institutional abuse, it can enable surveillance, it can enable problems, but equally it is already built in a way that is not owned by those institutions. And no matter if those institutions wanted to, a proof of stake model would be at risk of that. But something like this, which is software algorithmic in determining how consensus is agreed, can't realistically be owned by one single institution. It is already too decentralized. They need to control 80% of those institutions and those markets. So yeah, there's a risk, but as it grows and it becomes more decentralized, just like the internet, it won't have that single point of failure. It won't have that single institution like the Bank of England. The Bank of England need to innovate and get on board quickly before there is no Bank of England. And they realize that. And I think that's where people get frightened of what those banks are doing, but need not be worried, because there's too many people out there who are basically programming those institutions out of existence.
All right, there's some questions in the Q&A. Do you, around your slides, do you want to make those available for everyone?
We can ask the questions and then you can respond to them if you'd prefer it that way. It might, or you can read, or you can answer the questions from the Q&A, Matthew.
Yeah, you do that.
If you want to read them to me, I'm trying to find the Q&A. I can see, is this the webinar chat on the side?
Bottom of the screen, Q&A next to raise your hand.
No, I don't have a Q&A button. It might be my software. So if you could read them out, I'll answer them. So I apologize for that. I can't actually see them in the chat.
Jennifer, do you want to? Do you have it?
Yeah, I mean, Patricia asks Matthew, are we going to make these slides available?
Yeah, I believe that the link to will make recordings available for attendees, and also our slides will most likely go straight onto our GitHub, where we're trying to make what we do transparent and accessible to people. So we'll put them on our GitHub at some point.
Perfect. Okay. And then Eric Kim has asked, in what ways can we serve the community by holding enough XRP? I always thought about being a bank and helping the ledger somehow, but not sure the difficulty in doing that. I know banks will look different in the future, and I would love to know the first steps in becoming one.
So yeah, I mean, to become your own bank is to basically attain your own sovereignty of data. And with a technology like XRP, holding XRP tokens is a great way for you to hold some wealth and store of value, that will eventually, hopefully, providing these paradigms and technologies become adopted. It's still very early, but as they grow and they become more mainstream, more accepted and understood, as they're pushed into banking infrastructure, if you want to build your own bank, start by taking control of your data and the sovereignty of it. Get a ledger, get some wallets, store some of this crypto, read the white papers, read the tech, play around with some of the tools, and just try and go and build it. Get yourself into tech, go to a library, go take some programming courses. The SDKs are very accessible. They work for a number of different languages. If you know a bit of programming, you can start to experiment around with what the solutions that have been proposed are, and that really is where I would suggest anyone wanting to do that begins. Now, we started building a bank. Obviously, a lot of my experience in cybersecurity came from working with banks and hacking into banks, because banks have no end of money to spend on their security. So they want the best and they hire the best all the time. So there is a constant work of people trying to improve the security of these institutions. That gave me a lot of understanding of what those banks' problems and challenges were in life. So that really helped me a lot. If you don't have that kind of background, perhaps become friends with people at Canary Wharf, go down to the banking districts and, get talking to people that have a finance background. For me, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of exposure to things like SWIFT and international payments, Forex and these kinds of markets through the work I was doing in cybersecurity. Does that hopefully answer your question, I think? So is there others?
Yeah, well, the next part of the question is if where can one get started in the blockchain industry if you don't have a coding or engineering background? So I think you.
XRPL have a learning portal as well, which is aimed at complete beginners. It's well worth going through their course and their content there that they've made available to people, because it's a misconception that you need to be some kind of tech brilliant genius to understand and start building with blockchains. It's quite the opposite, actually. The technology is there, and a lot of the solutions, the low level stuff, RPC, all of this complex stuff in terms of the nodes and the algorithms and stuff is abstract from you. You can build on that on a high level. You don't need to dig into the internals, if you will, of how it works. And the XRP Foundation actually provide a learning portal, well worth checking out. There's a dozen courses on there you can work through to understand what their solution provides and get a better understanding of things from their perspective. And that's a great place to start if you've never done any of this kind of stuff before. It's aimed at beginners.
All right. And then will governments be able to shut down DAOs or DeFi? And can you use a DAO to change the medical or insurance industry? Thank you for your knowledge.
I mean, governments are going to try and control things that don't like all the time, and DAOs are no difference to kind of community groups. But if you think about what a DAO is, once it's on chain, once it's on a blockchain, once it has been programmed and set up and the people who hold the keys exist, those people could be anyone, anywhere in the world. And it's very difficult to get all of those people and round them up and put them in one place. Take the Pirate Bay, for instance, that is still online and has been repeatedly attempted to be shut down, even though the people who are responsible for building it have themselves faced incarceration. Once somebody builds a technology and builds a solution like that, like a DAO, and it's fully programmed and it's entirely on blockchain, and money comes in and it breaks up to the different parties, it goes to a pool where people can vote and say, hey, this is like a credit union, like what we're trying to build, is where people would vote and say, look, there's a pool of money. John here has proposed that we get some banners made and we go on a protest and we need some costs with that. And that is what kind of DAOs enable. So yes, there will always be a risk that governments won't like what a particular DAO is doing. Whether they will be effective in stopping that DAO really depends on how the DAO itself is built. So any kind of industry, anywhere where you see an institution today, anywhere where you see a centralizing of power is at risk of disruption through these technologies. And that can be in any sector of business. It's not just related to one particular industry. So pharmaceutical, manufacturing, supply chains, government itself may end up becoming something like a DAO. So these changes are there, and it's up to us really as people to decide what we want to shape. Like as I said at the start of the presentation, we shape technology. It's us and our ideologies and our beliefs and what we do with the technology that influences the society just as much as the technology influences us. So if you want to change the pharmaceutical industry with a DAO, go right ahead, start a DAO, get learning, and try to understand how you can bring about change by targeting an institution and disrupting its business model.
Yeah, and I would add that it's still very early days, but they are bringing in, DAO business-like models. I know Wyoming, has this DAO LLC concept that they're still working through. There's teething issues, but as more and more people adopt the technology, instead of thinking of a top-down approach at any business, the DAO is written with code. So a lot of this can function based on how you want to work with the code and the smart contract execution. But it's interesting. The last question Matt Gibson has asked, I get the concept of what you're saying, but unless you're a good computer programmed, is this going to be difficult to achieve for the average Joe holding XRP? Or is it as easy as, say, building a basic website? So I guess he's asking around the XRPL and how, right now, early days, how easy or hard is it to build on the XRPL? And he's asking how good, basically how good with tech do you need to be to achieve any kind of success building on the XRPL?
I think there are many projects out there that their technical expertise was less than the value of their digital goods, and they were able to make fortunes out of their digital goods and the things that they produced in creative ways without needing any technical skills. So, you know, whilst I'm talking a lot about the influence of programming, there's a diverse community of people out there that are using these technologies for different purposes. And my own ideologies, my own biases are clearly in the fact that I'm a low-level tech guy, so I speak about the low-level tech stuff. But you know, you can utilize somebody else's software. That's the thing. That's the beauty really about the internet, is it only takes one clever person. Everybody else can just download his software and use that clever person's software. And that's really what we're seeing with blockchain now, is as people begin pushing the boundaries. You know, if you wanted to create digital artwork, if you're a 3D modelist, you know, there are people out there in these communities that are willing to help you get on board with these platforms to start selling your artwork, start selling your creations through NFTs. Perhaps you build in-game levels, perhaps you build characters for a video game, things like that. You know, there are communities of people out there. There are groups of people who are welcoming and want you to enable you to have some kind of sovereignty and independence. And that's really a big goal of it. Is that I see a lot of the spirit of resilience in humans. In that these innovative people, you know, genuinely want other people to use this stuff too, because it's exciting and good for them. So, you know, yes, if you're going to build an entire bank and you're going to build that on a DAO, you're going to require a lot of knowledge, technology wise. If you're wanting to just build a video game where people gamble with dice or something like that, you know, then you might want to learn React. You might want to learn a bit of JavaScript. Ultimately, the better you are with technology, the more effective you will be at using it. But it isn't a prerequisite to participate in this new, you know, this new paradigm of computing. People are participating from all walks of life, from artists, from creative writers, from people doing, you know, machine learning, and it doesn't just solely focus on what people can do with technology. So find a skill that you're good at that you can use in these new markets and grow and develop that. Like with anything, the more time you put into something, the better you will become at it.
So thank you, Jennifer and Matthew. So this is really interesting. And thank you for allowing us to share the hard copy. We've got a lot of requests for that. So if you, I mean, it's entirely up to you, but if you'd allow us to share it, we'd share it with the audience that have asked for it. And later on today, we're actually having John McCoy and Nick Dazzi on the panel of our verifiable future, who are also building on XRPL a different product line, obviously, from what you're doing. It'll be interesting to see what it is that they're building on XRPL. But as you integrate and are engaged with this community with XRP and building on XRP, what else do you see that the community are working on?
I am genuinely, one of the reasons why I enjoy this space so much is that I'm learning new things every day, because there is new innovation, there's new changes, there's new proposals, there's so many people doing so many interesting things, you know, and whether that's NFT and in game, it's not my area of enjoyment. I like the low level problems, as I've stated before, but there's so much going on that I am constantly, like, I look forward to the time when I'm not doing cybersecurity stuff and I have time to do blockchain and development work there, because that's actually where really a lot of innovation is happening and a lot of changes are happening. So I'm seeing it getting easier to build tools, increase frameworks, the changes that are being proposed, things like NFTs. NFTs were only recently added to the Ripple mainnet, and they've already had something like 250,000 of them. One of the things that we did was we created this thing called an NFT watcher. It just sits on the blockchain and watches for the NFTs, and then takes each of those NFTs and makes a little video of them. So at the end of the day, I'm just getting a video of all these monkeys with hats and sombreros, and it's really quite fun. And I'm seeing all these people have fun with technology, and it really just excites me again. So I see a lot of that. I see a lot of people doing new and interesting things that perhaps we wouldn't have seen before. You know, virtual reality and augmented reality and the metaverse. You know, it makes me a little dizzy, but I've been into these spaces. I've walked around. I've interacted with someone halfway across the planet as though they were sitting in my living room, and sat down and ate a movie and watched a movie with them on a cinema screen, like we've just gone to the cinema. Really quite an innovative change to our society, that you could sit down and go to a movie with someone on the other side of the planet and it feel real, like you were there. You know, so I think that there's so much happening that it would be impossible for me to quantify any one set of changes, but people having fun with it, people learning new things about it, enabling new kinds of business models, gaming. And obviously that is why there's a massive explosion in gaming and the metaverse, because it's fun. People want to have fun with technology just as much as they want to sit down and have a boring banking business and check their finances and look at the stock price. They want to sit down with their friends and watch a movie. So there's a lot changing, and I believe that this Web3 is now coming into the forte and is realistically going to be something that we'll see a lot more of, which is why Cave Crypto is something that we're focusing on, purely a Web3 solution. We're not looking at the legacy tech anymore. We're looking at what is the future of technology and where is it coming. 3D printing will change things, and imagine being able to buy a good model. You're a collector of some vintage model, and the official model comes to you and gets printed out of your printer. And you've got proof of ownership of it, and the whole thing was electronic, and now you're sitting there holding your physical good. There's really a lot happening in these spaces for innovation to bring new, exciting changes to the world.
So when you rewatch this video, Matthew,
yeah,
what you'll notice, you're smiling the most when you talk about technology and about the most exciting things that are happening. So it really, really is interesting to watch what you're passionate about. And I'd encourage the rest of us to actually pay attention to what actually makes us happy and smile and motivated and move along in this crazy world. So let's pay attention to that. But I do have I just heard from Jack and his team. He's running a little bit late. He has a meeting that he just needs to finish. So we've got some extra time here. I do have a lot of questions. We talked yesterday about DAOs and the creation of DAOs, and one of the interesting things is, I won't have you answer them just yet, but just keep them in your mind, is, people thinking of creating DAOs, and the conversation yesterday was about Pharma DAO, creating an ability for repurposing drugs to be utilized globally, inexpensively, and without the FDA. All these drugs have already been FDA and then approved, and then repurposing these drugs to a larger population of the globe. And one of the conversations and questions about that was the DAO, creation of a DAO. And as we were going through the creation of this business model, it was, let's not build a DAO to fit a business model. Don't force a DAO into an existing business model, but change it around and create a business model based on the DAO. So some thoughts on that?
Is that aimed at me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So in terms of, formulating DAOs, if you think about DAOs as well as being enablement for community, it might well be that there's not, if you think about a business's goal is to kind of make a return, is to kind of look at the time that's used and the costing involved to make some kind of return and to improve the bottom line, to grow that business and scale it. You might just want to form a DAO about something you're passionate about. There's nothing wrong with having a group of skateboarders who all get together and decide, hey, we're going to once a year, we're going to go to a skateboarder retreat, right? We're going to all get together and have our little DAO, and everyone can see where the money's going, and we all pitch in and we pay our subs so that we can go, and then that can end up becoming an event or a business and growing into something. Communities can themselves drive innovation and drive new business into something that they perhaps didn't even think was going to be a business. They were just a group of friends getting together who wanted to go skateboarding. Or I heard it from a magazine publisher, a guy who publishes a well-known publication, I won't name it, but he just wanted to write stories about tech. He wasn't thinking about making a magazine. He wasn't thinking about making business. He was just, I want to write stories about tech, and I want my friends enjoy tech, and we're going to write stories, and this is how we're going to spend our time because we're enjoying our time. I think with anything, when you're trying trying to decide, do I have a hobby? Do I have a business? You know, I heard a good thing is like, you know, a brand creates fans, marketing creates customers, you know, and if you're thinking about these kinds of things, like, am I going to build a business? Maybe don't focus on, I'm going to build a business, perhaps focus on what it is that you enjoy and then why you would want that business to be a thing anyway. I mean, I went into cybersecurity for myself and built a business in cybersecurity because it was something I've been doing and I was very passionate about, and I wanted to do it for myself. You know, and the more that you find something that you engage and you relate to, and that is what you want to do with your time, you know, a DAO might just be an enablement for you to have a community of people who also enjoy that thing. And through that network, you might grow into something else, such as a retreat or regular meetups or community-driven events or whatever it is that grows into. Ultimately, we plant the seeds in life, and if you're not planting seeds of things that you enjoy, you're not going to get the fruits of those labor in a way that's something that you will enjoy too. So you know, if you want to form a DAO and understand how a DAO works, you know, got a developer friend and say, hey, I want to get a group of people together from my church to work on our allotment and just have some fun with it. You learn and you know, it might not be something that necessarily requires a DAO, but there are things that you can do. Have fun with what you're doing first, and then grow that into community or a business or an event, you know, down the road. If you're into baking, you know, start making a bakery. You know, there's a lot that can be done, and really this technology can enable small homegrown businesses, bedroom businesses, garage businesses. They can grow into much larger businesses through the enablement of this technology, because it allows someone to take it from their garage to a 3,000 square foot, you know, business park or whatever. And that's what comes through natural evolution of growth. Not all businesses succeed. So you might as well have fun while you're trying to do it.
Cool. So what was the impetus then, relating back to Cove Credit, and why you started building this, you know, for the people, by the people? What was the driving factor and force behind this?
So societal change, I guess, like people who are banding together, and particularly over the last few years, we've seen with the lockdowns and the global situation that's going on around the world, people have wanted to perhaps have a voice or speak out and fight against censorship and things like that. And it really presented an interesting problem for me, because it was like, well, you know, how does that look? How, you know, you've got existing models like a charity, people donate to charity. I've got friends that have done charitable work, you know, and there's always risks and there's always potential for someone to subvert the purpose of that charity and everything else. And I just, for us, a credit union was just like kind of a way of which a group of people, particularly driven by Jennifer and Jennifer's voice on political, you know, matters and society views, you know, how this grouping of people could perhaps work together to influence some kind of change in the society, and what would the tools that they would need look like to do that. And I remember Jennifer saying to me, we're going to build a bank. And I looked at her and I was like, are you sure about this? And I was like, and then before you know it, we were drawing banking and starting to actually build a bank. You know, and it's more like a credit union in terms of what we would do with voting ownership on a group of people want a particular fund to be used to solve a particular problem. And Jennifer's very passionate about individuals and their rights and things like that. And I am too. You know, we both have a shared commonality in that we very much believe that people shouldn't be led by institutions, that we as the people are the ones who should drive what institutions can do for us. So that kind of was just how we saw this technology as being something that could change a situation that many of the people in our existing communities or Jennifer's communities were already facing. And as a technology person and someone that likes complex problems, I was eager to try and do something like that. So yeah, I think the real change for us was when Jennifer came in. She said, I want to build a bank. Okay. It was so, quite an ask.
Oh, nobody can deny Jennifer's enthusiasm when she sets her mind to something. We've exchanged emails, and I can see it. But really, really cool, interesting. You know, Rob Cunningham is here on the panelist. I don't know if he's still listening in or grabbed a cup of coffee, but he's going to be on a panel at 10:50 a.m. Pacific time. The evolution of digital asset ecosystem. And I'm sure he's being tickled pink just now when you mention words like everybody has a right and everybody has a voice. And this right and voice must be heard, because we're overshadowed by institutions and political environments and large corporate organizations. Rob, I hope I set that up well for you. But so it's really, he must be really enjoying this conversation and the actions that you are taking today to create that. Although banking is a little bit of an issue, right? So one of the conversations that we were having yesterday on the yesterday's panel was identity, self-identity, sovereign identity. That is sort of the cornerstone of anything as we build out the future, the cornerstone of a movement and taking back that sovereign right of who we are, what we do, what we should share or allowed to share, and not give that up to anybody else. So that would be, have you seen over the last couple of years, as you continue to build your business and talk about people's right, what is the, and given that we had a period of pandemic when people were home and had the ability and time to think through what's important to them, but as we go through some more stresses in life, such as the economy imploding, reserves of cash disappearing with the valuation of the public markets, the question is, given that people around them are seeing more political, economic disasters, are they still thinking through what they started thinking through 3 years ago with independence rights and having the right to be who they are?
I think individual rights and the ability for us to live our lives free of government interference has been the driving force of so many conversations over the last 2 years that most people are now ready to say, yeah, I want to be able to live my life. I don't need somebody else to tell me how to live my life. And, people have been confronted with a lot over the last few years. So when we talk about identity assurance management or IAM solutions and cryptocurrency and what wallets and everything will achieve for that, it's there. The technology exists for people to be sovereign with their data, and it's just whether or not we're getting the solutions right for that. But if you think about Edward Snowden, people were genuinely not aware that governments might be en masse opening every piece of mail going to their house or inspecting every single phone call. And if you'd have told somebody that, they'd say, hey, you need a tinfoil hat, you're crazy, this is conspiracy. But I'm going to say the conspiracy theorists are up 7-0, right? I mean, it's the last few years have proved anything. It's that, institutions don't always have our best interests at heart. Governments don't always have our best interests at heart. They're not always correct. Experts are sometimes wrong in their fields. A lot of things are experimental, and when it comes to us and our individuality and what we decide as people to do, our independence and sovereignty, I think, is something that none of us can take for granted. While many people have been conditioned to accept a loss of freedom, it's because they don't know what freedom really looks like when they're given it. And once they have that freedom, they don't want to give it back. Because they don't want to live under in a world where governments can say that based on what you voted for online determines what you can spend your money on this week, or you've had a great month, and even though you're getting a good paycheck, you're not allowed to buy 2 pairs of trainers in a year. So you're only allowed 1 pair of designer clothing. You've already bought your 1 designer clothing for a year. You can't buy more because of climate. There are people, or independents. I want to farm chickens, or I want to grow my own crops. This is something that, government has no say in whether I'm allowed to feed myself, and I'm not reliant on them for feeding myself. So people, when they wake up to the realization about how our just-in-time shopping system, how we've handed over so much rights and given away so many freedoms, that once they're woken up to the idea of that they can have those freedoms back, they're willing to take them. And I think more and more people are waking up, and that's just a numbers game. Eventually, enough people will be awake to the fact that these institutions don't rule over us, they answer to us. And when we start holding them to account for things that have gone wrong over the years, I believe that society will be better off for it. Because right now the trust is gone. Trust takes a long time to earn, but once the trust is gone, earning it back takes twice as long. And that's really the situation that we're seeing in a lot of industries, and a lot of people are stepping forward and saying, well, you trust us. And people are not fooled twice. So I think that independence and sovereignty and the idea of the individual, I'm a little bit of a libertarian in that regards, in that I believe in a minimal to no government. I'm not ideal would be some government to take care of the roads and everything else, but no government would be a little bit frightening, but I'd be okay with that too, compared to big government, where they have a right to determine what food gets put on my table, how I spend my money, how I enjoy my relaxation time, how much of that time and how much of that money I'm allowed as well. All of these things concern me greatly, because I don't see that as anything under God's plan. I believe that God's law is ultimately the law that man should be living under, and government should be there to enable us to live a better life under these in a way that gives us independence. So again, it's personal bias. There's individuals in all of that, and everyone will have a different answer to the question: do they feel free in life? But you can take.
It's a good question. I mean, I think the real question is, which you brought up a little bit earlier, do you remember what it likes to be free? And do we still know what that is, right?
Right. The freedom of movement, the freedom of travel, the restrictions that we've all seen in our lives. And some people are not going to forget that, like, being unable to enter a bar unless you had a particular QR code, and because you might have some legitimate medical reason or concern to not go along with the status quo. There are many nuances to society, and as governments have become much more of authoritarian, they are in much more danger of being tyrannical. I mean, we've had some 80 years of world peace-ish, kind of. There's been a lot of war everywhere and a lot of harm. But governments themselves have always been, power corrupts. They're always in danger of becoming tyrannical. They're always in danger of taking more individuals' rights from them than are necessary, if there was ever a necessity to take them anyway. That's why I like the US Constitution, right? It's a God-given document that's supposed to enshrine our rights given to us as free individuals, and it applies all over the world. It's just that it's only respected by governments in one country. That ultimately these freedoms that are outlined in that are things that are perhaps universal. The idea of a Second Amendment, right? The idea that people should be able to overthrow a government is a scary thought for the government, but for the people that are being controlled and repressed and that are subjugated to tyranny, it's not. It's a dream. It's a hope. So again, our biases show as to what we believe freedom to be. But and the world has never been less free in terms of movement and everything else. It's something that we've all had to live through, and I think freedom is something that we all internally want and crave. We just perhaps don't see a pathway to it in today's society. And as these institutions continue to grab more powers because of their risk of becoming obsolete and then being replaced by something that transcends or grows from above them, I see open source and technologies and things as being a real driver and enabler of people being able to take in their independence, which is why when people talk about identity assurance management, IAM, in the blockchain space, and the idea of private keys being what unlocks you and your data being yours, not the centralized service, and dismantling silos through things like federation, we the people are the people that have the power. We decide who rules over us. We put them in charge, and if we don't like them, we don't have to do what they say. Ultimately we have our own rights as well, and there's a law of the land and common laws and very nuanced to that. And I'm sure that there's things that many of us would like to see changed in the world. And I think that it's all subjective. How free do you feel in life? Are you free to do the things that you enjoy? Are you free to pursue your dreams? If a government is getting in the way of you pursuing your goals and dreams, then the government's problem.
So that is one side of the equation for the government and the people. But when we look at what we're doing with XRP and what you're doing and what you're doing with Cove, for the people, by the people, identity and money is very important, probably the closest to anyone's heart as you can get, aside of your personal beliefs. How do you think that the big financial corporations that control all of that gateway today of finance and identity will give us space to develop our own ownership rights?
I think that's the beauty of open source and these technologies and everything else, is that we're taking that freedom. We're not asking for it, right? I'd rather ask their forgiveness than ask their permission at this point, you know, and I think that a lot of people are like that in terms of what they're building. And you look at things like FTX, like a centralization of exchange, and that collapse and all the harm that that's caused, you know, that was a history lesson repeating itself. People didn't listen with Mt. Gox. It was a Magic the Gathering trading card game that had a centralized power that went under. I was a victim in that. I lost a ton of cryptocurrency in that and ended up having to go through the legal process, the challenges, you know, and FTX is repeating history by doing that, but is being seized on quickly by institutions and government to say that this is a very dangerous thing. And there will always be two sides to the coin: people who believe that the government keeps them safe, and those who believe that the government inhibits their freedom. And one side will think this side is dangerous, and the other side will think the other side is dangerous. But the beauty of removing ourselves from that bias and looking at the technology is that technology is what enables us to be free, and governments will not be able to fully control things like our money and our independence and everything else. And they might be able to contain us in terms of, you know, locking down other things, but ultimately the human spirit is strong, and we're resilient, and history repeats itself there. And I've never known a tyrannical government to last long. So I'm belief is that we as people are always want to achieve a better humanity for all of us, you know, and it's power and corruption that ultimately shape what their actions will be. But again, I don't have a crystal ball. Like, I couldn't tell you what the future has. I just see that technology is one pathway that enables us to influence what our freedoms will look like in the future.
Perfect. Did we all, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Jennifer. This has been amazing. So informative. Love everything that you said. If you didn't speak as quickly as you did, Matthew, this would have taken us a little bit longer, but that was a wonderful presentation. Did we, all the audience, did we enjoy this? Did we enjoy this? Say yes, put an applause, say something nice, and let's keep encouraging this movement, development, technology, learning, and people like Jennifer and Matthew who are changing the world and have passion for what they do, and you can see that with enthusiasm that they have with what they're doing. So take your power, take your independence, do something that's going to make a difference in your life, enjoy doing what you're doing, and change the people's lives around that by doing that. Take some of the, I think Doc B said yesterday, you just, what you do is important, do it with passion, authenticity and abundance, and make sure that you live the life that you want to live, and that goodness will spread around you. Matthew, Jennifer, thank you so much for today. We appreciate it.
I really appreciate being invited on to speak, and I've sent you the slides. If you want to distribute them to your audience, that's also fine. We'll put them on our GitHub. You can find out more about us again, hacker.house. You know, go to the About page. We have our LinkedIn and social media and things from there. Cove.crypto will be launching. You know, as we finalize what we're doing at the moment, eventually there'll be something there for Web3 users as well. So yeah, thank you very much for the time, and I appreciate being invited on.
And I know that this community will assist you in your business and your endeavors. So when you need to reach out, and we'll rally around you guys to make you successful, because you do it well. Thank you.